Hi, guys. Welcome to the chat. Glad to see you guys on here chatting away. Hope you're doing okay on this Friday evening. Let me make sure that I sign into YouTube correctly in Instagram. I mess it up every time. So I'm going to type into Instagram. Feel free to join us over at my channel. Okay, let's jump in, guys. Before I welcome you guys to the chat, because I see you guys are already talking, let me give you just a little bit of an overview as to what we're going to be talking about tonight. I am going to be talking about and highlighting disturbed parents. This is a live chat that sorry, guys, I see that I froze up a little bit there. What did I do wrong? Hopefully, my camera is going to act right tonight. Disturbed parents is a live chat that I never want to do because it can almost take the form of bashing parents in the chat box, in the comments section. So anytime I do a conversation on disturbed parents, I have to always make sure that I'm leading with professionalism and that we are acknowledging only a small segment of people. And we are making sure as we talk about this that we're not talking about all parents that are disturbed, right? There are some really good parents. My mom is one of them. She's wonderful. I saw Deb earlier say she also had good parents. I hope I have that right. If not, Deb, I'm going to go back and correct that. But some of us are really blessed with good parents, right? But that doesn't exclude the reality that there are parents who should have never been parents. I just told somebody the other day in session, just because you were birthed from that person or conceived doesn't mean that that person is a parent. And there's a lot of ups and downs that can make the parent-child relationship very dysfunctional and painful and even traumatic. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. Some of the behaviors that disturbed parents engage in that can really make your life difficult. And we're not talking about the parent who maybe yelled at you every now and then as a child, or the parent who, slammed a few doors and said, they're sorry that they had a child. We're talking about the parent who is engaging. You're going to learn some new terms tonight, guys. Engaging in what's called maladaptive parenting, exposure of you to victimization and traumatization. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm also talking about the parents who are disturbed to a point of constant chaos. Constant chaos in your home, in your heart, in your mind. So we're going to get to all of that tonight. I'm also going to highlight, as I often try to do, the research and what it looks like for those of us who are treating families. Most of you are aware that I'm a child, adolescent, and family therapist. I treat a lot of families, children, and teens who are going through many of the things I'm going to be bringing up tonight. So I'm going to try my very best to look at the research with you, and I'm also going to try my very best to incorporate some experiences that I've had in therapy. So that being said, guys, let me go back to the chat box and say hello to you. I see, oh my goodness. Guys, let me restart this, okay? I see a lot of you signing on. Let me restart just so that we're not going to have issues, okay? Give me just a minute as I restart my camera, and I will be right back. Uh-oh, there we go. I'll be right back. All right, guys, we should be good to go. Okay, let's start with, thank you for being patient as I restarted my whole entire system. Okay, let's go with longevity rituals. Hello and welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Deb, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Cam, good to see you again. I also see Kat Sushi. Hello and welcome. Hope you're having a great Friday. MF. Oh my goodness, that could sound all kind of ways. So I don't I don't want it to sound that way. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat as well. There was a lot of you signed on here too. I'm very shocked to see that. I'm sad to say that a lot of you most likely can relate to this topic, but we're gonna get there. 50 La Fleur. I hope I got that correct. Welcome to the chat. Glad to see you tonight. The Nurse Who Loved Me, 89. Hello and welcome from Australia. That's a place I want to go before my last day on this earth. I have down a listing of countries I want to visit, and Australia is one of them. Welcome. Glad to have you tonight. All right, let me keep going. The Fairy Girl, hello and welcome. I don't want you to feel like I ignore you. I say that every time. Welcome. Glad to have you. Shay Wallace. I hope I have that correct. Welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Live Life. Hello and welcome to you as well. Glad to see you. Love, Laugh, Live. Maggie, always glad to see you in the live chat over at my channel. I see you mainly on Instagram, so always glad for you to join us. Welcome. Glad to see you. Sun and Sunflowers. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you as well tonight. And there's a lot of you continuing to sign on. I acknowledge a few more of you before we jump into the content. Annie Welker, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Sun Kissed Dark and Dainty 01, hello and welcome. Thank you for all that wonderful looking roses and flowers and such. I love that. It just puts like positive energy into the air, right, guys? T Mac, hello and welcome. Glad to have you as well. I see more of you, but I want to get into this content, okay, so that we have time to actually talk about the things that matters, right? So let's jump in. I'll acknowledge the rest of you as we go along. Let me explain just a few concepts here for you. So the first concept you're going to want to know is something known as maladaptive parenting. And this is basically a categorization of a wide range of behaviors, okay? Maladaptive parenting could be anything from the parent being overly protective and hovering and helicoptering, right? It could be abuse. It could be manipulation, triangulation, neglect. The list just goes on, okay? Maladaptive parenting is basically, as a child, you were parented by a parent, mom, dad, guardian, whatever. You were parented by an individual who was maladaptive. They were negative, harmful, possibly even traumatizing. Now, there's also a concept known as negative parenting, and it's sometimes used interchangeably with maladaptive parenting. So you can kind of look at the terms as similar. But negative parenting is just, I am completely a negative parent. I'm doing everything that's opposite of what would help my child develop in a healthy way. So this could be unconscious or it could be conscious. And for most of the parents that previously sought out my services, I no longer have these parents in my practice. For most of these parents who engage in negative parenting, they are doing things that's just downright unhealthy. And we're talking about cursing children, telling them they never should have been born, telling the child that they were a mistake, saying things like, I'll be glad when you grow up and get out of my life. Totally washing their hands, the child, when the child turns 17 and a half or 18, just really being a negative and neglectful force in the child's life. You can also say, or you can also think of negative parenting, I should say, as also including traumatization and victimization. So I've put you into a situation where you have now become a victim. You have now become a force in my life that's getting in my way. And so, because of that, I'm going to put you in any situation I feel like it, because I don't want to be a parent in the first place. I'm going to take you to go get drugs I want. I'm going to have you sit in the car while I prostitute or sell drugs. I'm going to drop you off at your friend's house and leave you there for a few hours without calling to check on you because I really don't care. Negative parenting is neglectful parenting. And it's kind of when a parent just says, you know what, I don't really want this responsibility. You have to consider disturbed parents, and I'm going to give you some information on what these parents look like. Disturbed parents really trying to function in a world with these parents, even as an adult, it really is a web of chaos. That's the way I want you to kind of think of this. It's a web of chaos, even as an adult child. Maybe you're trying to talk to your parent because you need advice, you need guidance, you need wisdom, you need something. Just trying to sit down with this kind of a parent and have a healthy conversation, adult to adult, can be really difficult. And maybe in some ways you might feel as if you're not being listened to, you're not being actively listened to, meaning the parent is not giving you eye contact. They're not making you feel like they're actually hearing what you're saying to them. Maybe you feel unloved. Maybe you feel confused. Maybe you feel ousted or pushed away or minimized. Maybe what the parent is saying to you is condescending. Whatever the case, it's a web of chaos. You can never just say, Mom, Dad, I need you. Can you help me out with this situation? Can you comfort me? Can you give me wisdom? Can you hear me out? Because it's a web of chaos. These kind of parents, disturbed parents who are challenging and difficult, they can also be known as baitors. And I talked about that in a short yesterday. I was at the car wash, in case you haven't seen it. I was at the car wash and I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened back there at Target? My mom loves throwing that term out there to be funny. I'm sitting in the car and I'm like, what just happened back there at Target? Did I just witness something? And I couldn't think of what it was. And what came to my mind was baitors. And these are individuals who say, come over here where I'm at. Let's fight. Let's argue. Let's get into a spat. Let's be confrontational with each other. And they really and honestly try to bait you into a position of losing self-control. And maybe it's not self-control that you lose. Maybe you're well in control, I should say, or you have your composure, but maybe you give a look at your mom or your dad a certain way, or maybe you slam a door, or maybe you huff and puff, whatever. They want to get you, baitors. They want to get you in a position where you lose your credibility. You're not being looked at as another adult or another human being that's upset. Baitors want to pull you out from a place of self-reservation and self-preservation. We can also say that. And sometimes these maladaptive parents can do just that. They bait you, they pull you in. And maybe you've been pulled in so much, you look back and say, how did I get so upset? What happened to my self-control, right? And baitors do a really good job at getting you to a place where you're questioning, how did I get that upset and why did I react that way? And that's why they're baitors. They know how to push those buttons. Okay. So you want to keep that in mind, guys, as we go throughout this live chat tonight, that we're talking about quite a few concepts here, not just disturbed parents who are not well, but we're talking about maladaptive parenting where there's manipulation, neglect, harmful behaviors, trauma. We're talking about negative parenting, parents who are just totally negative. They should have never, ever become parents, ever. And we're also talking about that web of confusion that they create in your life. Now, let me tell you what research says are disturbed parents. Disturbed parents are not just individuals who may be mentally ill or have mental health concerns or substance abuse issues. Disturbed parents can engage in behaviors because of intergenerational transmission. Here's what that means. For many years in a family line, we have been abusive, physically, emotionally, sexually. We've been abusive to generations within a long lineage of time, or over a specific period of time. So generations, okay? Intergenerational transmission of trauma can occur with disturbed parents. They take tools, behaviors, mindsets, dispositions, attitudes that have been abusive for many generations, and they pull from that and they use it in their own parenting. And so not only do they impact you negatively, but they may also spread their negative mindset, attitudes, disposition, behaviors, the list goes on, for generations to come, for many generations. So we call that intergenerational transmission of trauma, or abuse or neglect, whatever you want to throw in there. It's intergenerational transmission. That can show that a parent is disturbed. They take those really unhealthy, detrimental, traumatizing, victimizing behaviors, mindsets, the list goes on, and they raise you with that or deal with you in the same way, and then they spread it for many generations. That's one concept. A disturbed parent can also engage in male-parenting, which is, I'm doing all the negative things that most people know should never happen to a child growing up, should never be happening to my adult daughter, my adult son, but I'm doing it anyway. And I don't care what the research says, what psychologist says, what a therapist told me I should not be doing, what the police told me I should never do to my child. I don't care what anybody says. I am going to engage in these behaviors because I have free will, because I want to. I was in a store a couple of years ago, and I don't remember what store I was in, but I was buying something and I was going through an aisle, and I heard a parent from way across the other side of the store yelling at their child, screaming at their child, cursing the child out. And you would think that this was a little boy. This was a young man. He had to be around maybe early 20s, mid 20s. And his mom is just cursing him out and yelling and screaming in the store, manipulating him and, telling him, you're going to buy me this because I want it now, and this, that, the other. And I just remember finally making my way over to their aisle somewhere along the way in this shopping experience. And I just couldn't look at them. I just couldn't, because I was afraid they would see what I'm thinking. But I remember walking near them and I'm thinking to myself, this poor young man, in what world does she think calling him an MFer, telling him he's a nobody, telling him he's selfish and like his father? What does she think this is going to do? And she's doing this in a public place where other people like myself are listening. And she had no idea a therapist was listening either. But she was very, very dysfunctional with him. And it was painful for me to listen to. And he seemed like such a quiet young man. He wasn't fighting her back. He wasn't arguing back. She was very ferocious in her disposition towards him. And so that's male parenting. There's also something known as autistic fantasy. And I know those of you who know a lot about autism, don't become offended, and I hope that you don't take this the wrong way. I know you guys are probably thinking, oh my God, what does that mean? Autistic fantasy, if you Google it, it's basically a term to describe an individual, and some parents do this all the time. It's an individual who kind of goes away in a world of fantasy, okay? I don't particularly care for the term either, for those of you who are like, oh, that's a bad term. But this is what it's called. Sometimes it's referred to as autistic fantasy. The individual kind of goes away in their mind and lives almost like this make-believe fantasy world. It's almost like the individual is living in an Alice in Wonderland kind of mindset. And I've seen parents like this in my career for many, many years, and they don't take anything seriously. Nothing is serious. Everything is wonderful. Everything is fluffy. This is what you would call, what's that term? It's not toxic happiness. I can't think of the term. And I did a video on it on this channel. Toxic positivity. That's the term I'm looking for. It's kind of like that individual that just everything is wonderful. I'm in a Wizard of Oz kind of mindset. And so sometimes parents are like that as well. These maladaptive parents, these negative parents, they are sometimes in a fantasy world all on their own. And it's a very immature mentality to have. Disturbed parents are also known as chaotic, unpredictable, and very, very angry. A lot of them tend to have intense moments of rage, and rage that is really hard to kind of penetrate. You can't even get in to say it's okay. The argument's over, the fight is over. They're just raging. And most of these individuals tend to engage in corporal punishment or spanking or beating their kids. I've had kids in the past who have been beat with extension cords, with cooking utensils, the list goes on. And that's because the parent is very dysregulated. They're chaotic and they're intensively angry. They have little self-control. Let me also mention too, before I go to the chat box, that disturbed parents, we're going to continue this too, but I want to go to the chat box just to see what you guys are saying. Disturbed parents are also identified most of the time, not always, as having vulnerable narcissist traits. A vulnerable narcissist is a parent or an individual who comes across as dejected, depressed, sad, insecure, really hypersensitive. But the reality of a vulnerable narcissist, and especially if this is a parent, is that they're kind of sucking all of the attention away from you as the child, the adolescent, or the adult child, because they kind of demand attention because they're hypersensitive. So they may break down and cry on a what do they say, a drop of a hat. They may feel really insecure and verbalize all their insecurities. I'm a bad parent. I'm a terrible parent. I'm really sensitive. Be nicer to me. I'm very sensitive. I've heard that a lot as well. I'm not the best parent. I'm not the parent that these kids should come to. That should be the dad. Or a vulnerable narcissist parent may say something like, I messed up your childhood, right? All those those statements, they kind of, it's almost like, what's that term called, guys? I'm blanking a lot today. Pardon me for that. It's almost like you're looking for validation, and a vulnerable narcissist looks for validation by appearing insecure, hypersensitive, depressed, despondent, and needy. But really what they're doing in an undercurrent way is trying to gain your attention, trying to gain your validation, trying to gain something from you that they feel that they deserve. And so disturbed parents can be vulnerable narcissists. And if you look up vulnerable narcissism, you will probably find on Google some examples of disturbed parents who are very narcissistic, but they come across as very hypersensitive. Let me pause here, guys. Let me go to the chat box and see what you guys are saying. Let's start with Keisha Monique. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I also see Jason Z. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's also very controversial topic. I feel like I've been covering a lot of the controversial topics lately in my chats. Christine Lamb, hello, welcome, glad to have you. And I can tell this is your first live. I don't ever remember seeing you, so welcome, glad to have you. Okay. Thanks, guys, for welcoming Christine. That's so sweet of you. B, hello, glad to have you in tonight's live chat. I also see Sean Hazel, hello and welcome. Yeah, Main House, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. And I very much agree with that. Go ahead and check out the Gallaghers. Yeah. That's a good one. Thank you for that. You might want to just type that into YouTube, see if you can come up with it that way. That's really good. Thank you, Main House. Georgette Gray, I hope I said that correct. Welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat as well. B, did you really go to the car wash? Oh, I love you. You're great. I swear, I'm going to try to do that more often. I'm grocery shopping and things come to my mind. I'm at TJ Maxx and things are coming to my mind. So you may see me doing some more normal stuff and uploading it to shorts. And I'm glad I encouraged you to be productive. I'll put it that way. Judges Bailiff, hello and welcome. Yeah, good to see you too. Welcome to the live chat. Imagine Peace, hello and welcome. Haven't seen you in a little while. So glad to have you tonight. Welcome. All right, guys, I am looking for comments. Here's Annie Walker. Annie Walker says, my mother, no father, was never affectionate, never said I love you, never encouraged or supported me, made me buy my own personal needs. So I started working at 10, physically, emotionally abusive. Yeah, absolutely. That's not a comfort. That's not a situation that I haven't encountered, is what I'm trying to say. Especially being a therapist. I look for two things when I have a child that comes to me and says, hey, Miss Tamara, my parents don't hug me. They don't tell me they love me. They're very distant and cold with me. I look for two important things. One is I look for culture. Is this a cultural thing? Is this something that this individual and the parents do as a part of their culture? I know for certain cultures like the Indian culture, for Asian cultures, or the Chinese culture, there may not be a similar level of affection that is showed within families, but affection is showed in a different way. So sometimes if I have a new family, for example, and there's a child who brings this up, what I'll do is I will ask that child, what are some of the cultural things that you guys do? Is this a cultural thing, or is this how mom and dad always has been? So that's number one. Number two, I also look to see if the parents are narcissistic, because again, if you have a narcissistic parent, even if it's a vulnerable narcissist, that parent's not going to show you much affection, because it's not about you in the first place. It's about them. And if they're uncomfortable, or if they don't like physical touch, don't look for pats on the head, pats on the shoulders, hugs, because it's never going to happen. To me, that's if it's not a cultural thing, it's a very unhealthy thing in a family. If it's cultural, I totally get it. If it's not cultural, to me, that's a problem. We speak through physical touch, right? And so there's reasons why parents hug their children or high five their kids when they do good. Even as a therapist, I hug my kids that come to see me sometimes. If the child initiates physical contact with me as a therapist, I am all ready for a hug. Or, sometimes I'll have kids tug on my shirt, and I'll look and I'll pat them or something. I'm always open for that, because it's communication. So for a parent to not do that, you almost have to question what's going on here. I'm sorry that happened to you, by the way, Annie Walker. I'm sure it's stuck with you. The Universal Basic Library. Wow. I like that. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says, hello, this is my first live chat ever. Thank you for making it feel inclusive. Yes, you're welcome. And thank you for that. That's my goal, every live chat. Access to Rome. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Kat Sushi says, I remember my mom calling the cops on my older sister because my sister picked me up from school. I got screamed at by my mother for going with my sister. I was only 7. Well, that shows you something's going on there. Sounds like intense rage. Some research, and I'm going to go over this in just a little bit here, but some research in psychology suggests that some of those very hypersensitive parents who automatically their automatic reaction to something is rage, they tend to either be on the borderline personality spectrum. Doesn't mean that they have the disorder, but they may have some characteristics, and they may be on that spectrum of borderline personality, and they tend to be at the severe end. And the severe end of borderline personality would be that sometimes they react in ways that are not rational, and sometimes they can become very paranoid and even psychotic, depending on what the trigger is and what they're angry about. It's almost like the severe end of the borderline personality spectrum is, if I get upset, if I perceive something a certain way, there's going to be a huge volcano. I'm not going to just have an attitude. There's going to be some really hard moments here, because I overreact. That's one. Research also suggests parents who have bipolar disorder that's untreated can also go into a rage instantly. It doesn't take much. And that's very traumatizing, right, guys? It can be. Jets, hello and welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says, I think the theme BAITORS fits well. Some can feel the rain, others just get wet. Oh, I like that. Yes, I like that a lot. Yeah. Shay Wallace says, giving me her medication. Yeah, that's a no-no. That's a no-no. Right? Because everybody reacts differently to medication. So, that could have been a bad reaction, could have been death, could have been something. That's not good. Yeah. Keisha Monique says, this is exactly my childhood and current life. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry to hear that. Robert Pukey Ray says, maladaptive sounds like they had bad tools and could use some education. Negative and counter parenting sounds better. Yeah, absolutely. So keep in mind that some of these terms are used interchangeably depending on who you're talking to, what therapist has, certain training, the list goes on. Maladaptive parenting can definitely be treated. The problem with maladaptive parenting, though, is that a lot of parents who have really poor skills sometimes don't see that their parenting is maladaptive. So you may not be able to get that parent any help, right? Because they're kind of in denial sometimes, and maladaptive parenting has a wide range of behaviors from mild to severe. So kind of look at that on a spectrum as well. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going through the comments, guys. I'm going to put this up here so you can see it. Shay Wallace says, leave me with weird people because she wants to party for a few weeks. Yep. That's an issue too. Absolutely. Can you imagine how a therapist would react? A good therapist would react if a child says, my mom left me with the next door neighbor so she could go on a date, but my mom just met the neighbor last year. That's an issue. For me as a therapist, that's neglectful. You don't know what's going on in that house with that new person, right? Katsushi says, my mother is very controlling, but she absolves herself of parental responsibility. Yep, that's another issue. I don't want to be a parent. I know I brought you into this world, but I need to live it up. I need to party. I need to date. I need to get high. I need to get my anger out on you sometimes. It's not okay. Not okay. And again, let me reiterate, I don't want to make this a blame live chat. That's not what this is, but these are behaviors of disturbed parents, and we need to talk about it. Keisha Monique says, I wasn't even allowed to use her sanitary napkins at 13. I had to go out and get a job. Yeah. That would be considered in some jurisdictions or states child neglect, depending on how young you were and depending on if she had the money and just didn't buy you anything. Sometimes it's really hard to determine, though, if that is a personal choice out of neglect or if that is just a parent making you do something that they want you to do, like get employment. So it's hard to tell. And that's where Child Protective Services kind of gets confused. They're like, we don't really know what this behavior is saying. Ronald Zion, welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, they almost seem intentionally unreachable. Yes, very unreachable. And that's what Lindsay Gibson of the book Immature Parents, Adult Children of Emotionally Detached Parents. I'll say that one. That's what her book is about. Parents who seem to be very unreachable. And these are called neglectful parents as well. We can also put them under the heading of negative parenting. They are never available psychologically, emotionally, physically. They are never reachable. And that is sad. I used to have a lot of parents in my practice like that. One last comment before we go back to the content. The nurse who loved me, 89, says, my mom told me she only had me because of here we go. I have a hard time with acronyms, guys. SA. Okay, those of you who are smarter than me probably know what that means. So we're going to keep moving. That she begged the doctor for an abortion, but the doctor said no. I was 15 when she told me that. She's a mom, but she secretly resents it, us, her kids. I would not be surprised. Disturbed parents don't have boundaries. And to tell you something like that is either cold, cruel, or just simply immature. I don't know what her reasoning for saying that is, but I think it's very, very negligent. I'm sorry that happened to you. All right, guys, let's jump back into the content, okay, guys? And then I'm going to tell you how this impacts you. How does a disturbed parent impact you? There's a few common terms that I think you're going to want to know. You may have never heard of before. So we left off at vulnerable narcissism and parents kind of being hypersensitive, and kind of sucking all of the attention away from you because they're so hypersensitive. Hypersensitive parents will break down in tears, cry, will snap out, throw things, pull their hair out, cut themselves. The list goes on, and they'll blame it on, I'm just a bad parent. It's me, 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 me all the time. And that puts a damper on the child's world. That makes the child feel insecure. It undermines the safety of the child. And you could be an adult child as well. That's what I'm talking about. And it can sometimes pull the attention away from what your need is in that moment, because it's all about me, 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 me. I'm a bad parent. And that in and of itself is narcissistic if your parent is a vulnerable narcissist. Also, for a disturbed parent, research highlights rejecting parents and disconnected parents. We just said that with Ronald Zion. I'll put the comment back up here on the screen for you. He says they almost seem intentionally unreachable. 100%. They tend to be disconnected and they tend to be rejecting. Nope. I know I had you, but I don't want anything to do with you. Rejection can also be undercurrent and subliminal. It could be, I'm going to praise your sister more than you. Or I'm going to tell you, you're like your dad, who I divorced because he has problems. And my other son is like me, the wonderful kid. That's rejection as well. Whether it's verbalized or not, you feel it, you sense it, you believe it. And it may even be proved if somebody saw it with their own eyes, A rejecting parent can also totally neglect some of the most important things in your life, primarily as an adult child. Let's say maybe that parent didn't attend your wedding. Your parent has nothing against your other spouse. Your parent has nothing held against you getting married. It's just they forgot, or they had to work, or their vacation was scheduled at the time that you were getting married, right? It could be that parent missed your graduation because, I had to go do something instead. So that can be rejection as well, whether it's verbalized or not. So these are the things that research is highlighting as being a part of an immature and emotionally detached parent's repertoire of behaviors. And some of these parents are very, very representative of what psychology calls immature defense styles. And that could be rejection is a defense style, acting out, slamming things, throwing things, crying, threatening to do things to you, screaming at you, threatening your life sometimes. I once had a child right in therapy with me. Well, he's not a child technically. He was 18. And to me, he was a child. And he's on the phone with dad. And dad said, I'm fed up with you saying you're so depressed that you can't get a job. I'm fed up with you saying that you're depressed so much that you can't go to school, get your grades on right. And he said, I will kill you. I will kill you. And then he says to me, he says, do you hear me say that to him? That was a CYF, a Child Protective Services call right there. This was years and years ago, maybe when I first started. It was like my first encounter with a family that was that dysfunctional. And to hear a parent threaten to kill their child is just horrific. But that was a part of his acting out behaviors. Denial is another immature defense style of these kind of parents, and projection. I'm going to project onto you those very ugly pieces of me that I hide on the inside. Now, let me also say too that, and I'm going to post this in the description box for you guys so that you can look at some of the research. Let me also say that the research on disturbed, immature, emotionally detached parents show that there is a huge relationship. There's a big relationship between adverse childhood experiences. I'll put it that way. Adverse childhood experiences and a development of a negative or maladaptive style of thinking. So here's what all that clinical lingo means. That if you have a series of adverse childhood experiences, as you develop over time, there is a possibility that you could associate those adverse childhood experiences with almost everything in your life, and how you think about life, and how you think about being an adult, and how you process things in life, period. So that shows you that relationship between that negative parent, that disturbed parent, and the way that you think about life and function in life. And I'm going to give you at least 10 things to think about, and kind of look within and say, did I struggle with that? Right? Especially if you've had a parent like this. So there's a strong relationship between those two things: adverse childhood experiences and negative thought patterns about life, about being an adult, about relationships, your identity, your self-esteem, the list goes on. Some research also suggests that without that safe, loving, embracing parent-child relationship, there's likely to be a personality pathology that develops. So you may see, for example, a lot of you probably already know this research, you probably see a relationship between borderline personality and childhood trauma. That if a parent has been neglectful, and they've had maladaptive parenting, they've been manipulative, they've been cold, angry, hurtful, the list goes on. As you develop over time with those kind of parents, you can start to develop a really intense fear of abandonment, a really intense fear of abandonment. You could have a shaky identity. You could also have really impulsive urges for suicide and self-harm. You can also experience dysphoria or depression, and very stable and unstable, and stormy relationships. And the research highlights that the development of a personality pathology like borderline personality is typically related to very negative maladaptive parenting or childhood trauma. So you guys, I'm sure you already know about that research. I want to make sure too that I mention, maybe I'll mention this at the end. Let me go to the chat box. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'll mention some other things before we jump into how these kind of parents impact you. So I'll let you kind of process what I just said. Let me go to the chat box and answer some questions here, and then we'll talk about how this impacts you, because the most important part of this live chat tonight is to highlight the negative impact of having disturbed parents from childhood all the way into adulthood. It really can cause a storm in your world, right? I hope I'm saying this correctly. Adila, am I saying that right? I hope so. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that. And I really hope that it's helpful, especially these really tough conversations, right? I once had somebody log on to my YouTube page, and they were like, on my YouTube channel, and they were like, do you ever talk about anything positive? No, I don't. Because these are issues that we need to talk about, right, guys? So Elizabeth Pepper, hello and welcome to the track. Glad to have you tonight. Says, what would you suggest for an adult child who is cutting contact with their abusive, antisocial, personality disorder parent who is concerned for their preteen sibling the parent still has access to. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That all blended in. Hold on. Okay. What would you suggest for an adult child who is cutting contact with their abusive parent who is concerned for their preteen sibling? The parent still has access to. Well, I hope I'm interpreting this correctly, what you're saying. There really is not much you can do. The only thing that I would suggest is being a constant support for that preteen sibling, right? So always being available to them, okay? Because with a parent who is antisocial personality, you know as well as I know, there's coldness there sometimes. There's inability to communicate and connect sometimes. There's abusive behavior sometimes. There's isolation and withdrawal, right? So if we look at all of those characteristics of antisocial personality disorder, the best thing that I can suggest is being a stable support system for that child, not necessarily talking against that parent to the child, right? Because you want to really look at it from the child's perspective. If you talk against that parent, you're really burdening the preteen, right? Even though you may feel like you are supporting that preteen or you are validating them, which you may be, but sometimes talking against that parent, can add burden to the sibling, right? Because now the sibling has to deal with the reality of who the dad is, if that makes sense, or who the other parent is, I should say. Okay, so that would be the way that I'm assessing that question. That would be my suggestion there. The other thing is maybe teach that preteen the signs of antisocial personality, right? Help them become knowledgeable about what it is so they can have a broader scope. Because I think the trauma and the damage comes in when you don't know what you're looking at and you can't make sense out of the behavior. So that would be my suggestion. That's my honest suggestion for that. I hope that was helpful. Cam says, living life like that, BAITORS sounds exhausting. You would think they get tired of it. Not, you would, but not at all, right? BAITORS enjoy the act of baiting. It's the fact that they can kind of throw a hook and reel you in. That's the process that they like. Think of somebody who's a dark empath, somebody who has the trait of Machiavellianism, which is that deep desire to cause havoc, right? To see something go wrong. Someone who has the trait of Machiavellianism loves to go behind your back as a coworker and talk to the boss about you, maybe stalk you a little bit, and then give all that information to your boss in hopes of your boss seeing you differently and treating you differently. That's that internal, look what I've done. I can't wait to see how this pans out. It's a very, very deep-seated evil, if you ask me. And so that is basically at the core of most baiters. They love to throw the hook and reel you in. That's the part they love. So in a common sense, rational way, you would think they would get tired, right? No, they enjoy it. Randolph Howard, hello. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Welcome from New Orleans. I have a client from New Orleans, and she's so cool. I really like her. If I weren't her therapist, we'd probably be friends because she's so, quote unquote, colorful because of living in New Orleans. Shay Wallace says, my mother hated size. Oh, I see what you're saying. My mother hated, okay, to her, that was ultimate disrespect. Oh, okay. To her, that was ultimate disrespect. Yeah. Let me just say, that's kind of a part of that hypersensitivity, right? Sometimes these parents who are vulnerable narcissists, they're not okay with certain words that you use. They don't like the way you dress sometimes, or they're going to share with you how displeased they are in you for something. And they do it in a way that makes it look like they are so very burdened by you. Sometimes that's the dynamic there. Okay, just looking for one more or two more comments before we jump back into the content. Robert Pukey Ray says, yeah, I've seen a negative mom and her son in the same way. Yes, yeah. Poor child gets babysat by the neighbor. Kid mutters awful things they say to her. Cuss words. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Kids pick up on things. One of the reasons why I love children is they are so very honest. Most of them are so very honest. The nurse who loved me, 89, says my mom was severely abused, incest survivor. My God, I'm so sorry. That's horrific. Before I continue with this comment, let me just say emotional incest is also I'm not going to say it's maladaptive parenting, but sometimes it can be. If you have one parent, who witnesses what's called emotional incest and does nothing about it, then we can say that's maladaptive parenting, because they're turning a blind eye, right? They're putting that off as if it's not existing, and it very much is. For those of you who are not aware, emotional incest is the idea that I'm taking a child and putting them in the position of the mother of the family or the wife, right? I usually see cases of emotional incest with fathers who are single, and fathers who maybe lost their wife to cancer or divorced the wife, and he has full custody. The daughter, who is the older daughter, this is just an example of the dynamic, will sometimes step up as the wife, and the dad, instead of treating that girl as daddy's little girl, I'm going to protect you and love you and put up healthy boundaries, the dad looks for her to cook the dinner, looks for her to listen to his emotional problems, looks to her to help him make decisions about what he's wearing. It's turning that child into a wife. And so abuse is often sometimes, and maladaptive parenting is often sometimes including emotional incest. So the nurse who loved me, 89, says my mom was severely abused, incest survivor, and she never had help or got treatment. So she's highly traumatized and reactive. Absolutely. And sometimes those kind of parents, it can be really difficult to be their child, right? Because they need help themselves. So they're not able to really love you sometimes or help you, because they need it themselves. Okay. Thank you so much. Is it Sabrila 888? Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Yeah. I also hate that as well. The nurse who loved me, 89, says I hate hearing parents yelling at their kids. Yeah, me too. We know that that's something that can happen because kids can just hit those right buttons. But sometimes it's like, let's not do that. Okay, let's go back to the content, guys. Let's go into, how does this impact you? Well, let's start with the most common issue that research has highlighted. And that's the development of a personality pathology. Imagine growing up in a home, and for those of you who have experienced this, I'm not saying that you have a personality pathology. You may not, but this is for some of the kids who do, some of the adults who have had traumatic childhoods. Personality pathology can come about if you have a parent, for example, in the example I used earlier about emotional incest, if you have a parent that's pushing you into the role of wife or pushing you into the role of husband, and you have to carry not only their emotions, but also your emotions, their thoughts, but also your own thoughts, their challenges, but also your challenges, plus maybe try to influence your siblings who may be younger than you, That's a whole plate of dynamics. What child or adolescent can manage that? So you are likely, according to research, over time to fall into behaviors, mindsets, patterns of thinking, and patterns of emotions that can later be identified as a personality pathology, a personality disorder. Some of the most common personality disorders is the development of borderline personality disorder, the development of avoidant personality disorder, where you desire closeness, but you don't know how to get it. You desire a relationship, but you don't know how to become a part of one. You want to be married and happy, but you don't know how to make that work or how to make that happen. So, avoidant personality, dependent personality disorder is also another disorder research looks at. And that's when, you're so dependent on somebody else that you can't make a simple decision. And that could be, I don't know what to eat for breakfast. I don't know what job to take. I don't know what shoe to wear. I don't know what pants outfit I should wear today, pantsuit. I don't know if I should keep my hair short or long. I don't know. Should I wear that ring and that bracelet? Should I go to that party or not go to that party? It's like dependent personality disorder is every single and every little detail has to be decided upon with the help of somebody else because you can't function. So that's another disorder. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder is also another disorder that research has highlighted. If you guys were with me last live chat, a couple live chats ago, I talked about obsessive compulsive personality, where you kind of have this tendency to be rigid. Things have to be perfected. It has to be a certain way. And if not, life is just unstable for you, And obsessive compulsive personality disorder can also include intense moments of rage, especially when things are not the way that you feel they should be. So research highlights that as another personality disorder that can develop. And believe it or not, some research suggests that, being raised under disturbed parents can also lead to antisocial personality. You can actually over time learn to withdraw and isolate and shut your emotions off from other people. And you may do that so frequently that it almost puts you in a category of a sociopath because you have no emotions towards anybody else. All you want to do and desire to do is protect your heart and mind. And so relationships are unstable because of that. And so this is the most obvious consequence to growing up with a disturbed parent. The other thing that research suggests is there may be what's known as a role reversal or role confusion. Role reversal may mean that instead of me being the son who is the leader of my siblings because I'm an example, you then become the husband. It's that emotional incest again. You become the husband. So you're no longer, this is a role reversal. You're no longer the older son. You're now the husband. And mom is the child. That's the role reversal. The other thing is role confusion. Who am I within my family? Am I the big brother or the husband? Am I the husband or, what is this? Am I being treated like the youngest child or am I being treated like the middle child? Like, who am I? So role confusion, not knowing where you belong. There's also an ongoing pattern of destabling or destabilized relationships in your life. When you grow up under disturbed parents who don't know how to parent you in a healthy way, communicate with you in a healthy way, share their thoughts and feelings with you in a healthy way, then you're not going to have those abilities either. That's not everybody, but this is, those who this has affected. You may not be able to have a stable relationship. So they become stormy and roller coaster. You may also find yourself hopping from one relationship to the next, just trying to find peace of mind, right? I had some peace of mind over there with Jasper for 20 years. Now I have to move on to Kevin because Kevin makes me feel even safer. You get tired of Kevin and then you go to, Mike over there because Mike makes you feel better than Kevin did and Jasper. And so it just continues, right? And this is for Men as well. You may go to Tiffany and go to Kayla and then go to Michelle over there because you're looking for security, love, and safety in all those different relationships, you know? That's the sad part. Research also suggests that impaired autonomy is something that happens. It's really hard for you to be independent, right? So there's an impaired autonomy. And this is not dependent personality where you're dependent on other people. This is, I don't know how to be independent. So I always have to have a friend with me, a family member, a cousin, because I can't go to the grocery store by myself. I can't move into an apartment by myself. It has to be with somebody else or I'm going to die, kind of thing. There's also what we call identity fusion. And that's when your identity with somebody else fuses so much that you don't know if those are your thoughts or their feelings or your feelings. There is identity fusion with somebody else in your life. And that could be maybe a cousin that you've grown close to, maybe a sibling, maybe a quote unquote surrogate mother or father. Whatever the case, you can develop over time this identity fusion where everything is so enmeshed, you know? You don't know what's you or them. And that is a scary place to be. Research also suggests, and I've seen this in my practice a lot, which is something known as insufficient self-control. There's insufficient self-control. It's almost like constant gratification seeking, and you don't know how to pump the brakes. It's almost like drug abuse studies where researchers do studies on rats and they want to understand drug abuse and addiction, and so they give a rat in a cage some food, and the rat has to push the button every time they get hungry or every time they want to go back to that delicious food they've already had 900 million other times before. But it's kind of like in these studies, the rat goes over and they press the button because they want that food they're becoming addicted to. And so that kind of happens in relationships as well. It's like, I have to have that gratification. I have to have it now. So we call that insufficient self-control. There's also something known as subjugation, I should say. I always mispronounce that. And that is when you kind of feel like you have to meet the other person's needs in order to avoid consequences. So you have to always delay yourself, or delay gratification, or withhold, or hide, or minimize your own needs to please somebody else because you don't want that negative consequence of rejection or of being told you're wrong. Okay. It's almost like a safe way of, or a nice way that you may be saying to that other person, just don't get mad at me. I'll do it your way. That's really what that is. Don't get mad at me. I'll do it your way just to avoid problems with you. There's also an unstable or dysfunctional self-image that can be developed if you've had an experience under disturbed parents. Who am I? That's kind of the constant question. What's my likes? What's my needs? Who am I? What does this family stand for? Do we ever become a part of a different socioeconomic class level? Can we ever rise to the top? Right? So there's a lot of difficulty with self-image and self-esteem. And before I go to the chat box just to see what you guys are saying, there's also what we call emotional inhibition, or emotional inhibition. I'll use that term. And that's when you constantly kind of keep your emotions internalized under your own control. You never express what's going on. And you always, even on your face, your affect, AFFECT, the way that your face looks, it always looks like you're okay, because you've developed emotional inhibition where you're just kind of holding all your emotions like this, because you don't want to be angry. You don't want anybody to be angry with you, is what I'm trying to say. Or you don't want anybody to have an opinion about the ways that you feel. So you kind of hold your emotions back, emotional inhibition. And lastly, before we go to the chat box and wrap up, let me just say, sometimes you can get through life with these parents with a few traumas, including complex PTSD, or you can get through life or get through your child development untouched. Yes, you may have experienced all these traumatic experiences, but you may develop into a very stable adult. That is the confusion of the field of the field of psychology, because sometimes kids have gone through terrible traumas and they are highly resilient and they come out just fine. And you may too. I don't know. You have to be the judge of that. Okay, let me go back to the chat box and then we're going to wrap up, guys. It's been a lot, this live chat. At least for me, my brain feels overloaded. Sun and Sunflower says, needed my mom with an art project and she said she didn't have the problem in school and ignored me. She eventually helped me at the last minute because I was in tears. Yeah. Sometimes it's really hard to get across to that parent, I need you, right? Because they don't care what you need sometimes. That's why they're disturbed. That's the definition is in the title. They're disturbed. And so they're emotionally disturbed, psychologically disturbed. And for you to say, I need you, is putting upon their shoulders a burden, and a burden that they don't want. You guys may be wondering too, what does it mean when a parent was unintentionally harmful? Now, some of you have literally attacked this topic on my channel like a lion attacks its prey. Because I think for a lot of you, the idea is this: how can a parent harm their child unintentionally? Or how can a parent abuse their child unintentionally? There is some very, very slim research that suggests that maybe certain parents can unintentionally abuse because they don't know what they're doing. They're inadequate, they're insufficient, they're immature, they're detached. So they do things that's harmful, whether they realize it or not. And so Sun and Sunflowers, having a parent like this, you're crying and you need help, that shouldn't have happened that way, right? Mom should have said, do you need my help? Some really good parents offer, do you need me to help you with that? Do you need a tutor? Should we talk to your teacher? That's an involved parent, right? I'm sorry you had to go through that. Erica Garden says, wow. Yeah. That's interesting. Main house goes back to a term I mentioned earlier, which is autistic fantasy. And main house is asking, is that bordering on cognitive dissonance? I would say so. I would also say it's bordering on total neglect, because what the quote unquote autistic fantasy is it's a defense mechanism. It says, I see that I'm a terrible parent. I see that I'm a disturbed parent. I also see that I'm harming my child, but I'm not going to let that penetrate my heart to make me change. I'm going to now go and play a video game and get sucked into that for hours because that's where I am. Or I'm going to surround my entire property with flowers and trees and decorations and all kind of things that puts my mind into a different world, a fantasy, because this is easier for me to manage. Parents who engage intentionally or unintentionally in autistic fantasy, the way that I've seen it is these parents may engage in pretend play themselves, dressing up, playing house. I once had a lower functioning individual who consulted with me from a different country, but I would call them lower functioning, the individual, because, this person would dress up And I'm talking dress up like Spider-Man, walk around the house in a Spider-Man outfit, would wear Spider-Man house slippers, had a Spider-Man toothbrush, had Spider-Man toothpaste. Like, this person's entire world was engulfed by Spider-Man. And we're not talking about just an adult who likes something. We're talking about a total defense mechanism. And it interfered with this individual's work and personal life. They were actually fired because of this, and they didn't have any relationships. So I would say it can be a form of cognitive dissonance, but it can also border total neglect. Total neglect. Sean Hazel says, I definitely experience autistic fantasy. Yep. That can also be a way that these disturbed parents can impact you. You know, you kind of take on different behaviors that may be unhealthy. Deb says, sounds like narcissistic rage. Sometimes these parents do have narcissistic rage. You know, think of narcissism on a spectrum from mild to severe. A vulnerable narcissist may be the more mild to moderate narcissist who just breaks down and cries and say, I'm a complete mistake. Whereas maybe a severe narcissist will throw things and destroy property and have to get arrested because they're so upset. Just to give you some context. The Nurse Who Loved Me 89 says, explosive rage, and you'd never know when it would happen or what would set it off. Absolutely. What I've seen in my own practice with people who have this intense rage is that sometimes nothing can set it off. Sometimes the individual can be in control as long as they don't feel like they are being told no, and as long as they don't feel like you're getting in their way of something. And I've actually have provided therapy to disturbed parents who react in a strong rage because a child just says, hey, mom, can you not wear this to my wedding? Can you wear this instead? So sometimes it's hard to figure out what has triggered this intense rage. Why is this parent acting so angry? You may never know. And it may be something very, very small. And let me also throw this in here. Sometimes a psychotic parent, a parent who's dealing with a removal from reality, sometimes this kind of parent can react out of anger because of what they think you're saying to them. Does that make sense, guys? You may not be saying anything to them that's offensive, but they think you are. And so therefore they react in intense rage. Have you ever been in an argument with a parent that says something like, so what are you trying to insinuate? Are you trying to say I was a bad parent? And then maybe you're trying to say, no, that's not what I meant. And the parent says, yeah, that's exactly what you meant. I heard that little bit of offensiveness in there. And you may say, no, that's not what I meant. And they say something like, it's exactly what you meant. I heard you say it, and so that is rage as well. And it comes off almost like a psychosis. Sometimes it's like you can't change how that parent is seeing it. They're going to believe what they believe. That's sad, right? Imagine Peace says, that's my stepfather. Yeah. That's hard. Fairy Girl says, thank you, Fairy Girl. Says, much compassion, y'all. Here's to less suffering. Yeah. Thank you for that, Fairy Girl. Llewellyn Weldon, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, thank you for your kind and compassionate heart. Oh, thank you so much. Says that I am new on the chat. Yes, and welcome. So glad to have you. Thank you for that. That's so kind of you. Deb says, so sorry for any of you having to deal with this kind of awfulness. Yes, me too. Thank you for that, Deb. Eartha Page, hello and welcome to the live chat. Says, both my parents used to hit a lot. Me as a little girl, pathetic. Yeah. Keep in mind that disturbed parents also use what we call corporal punishment, but they also spank and beat more than the average parent, because sometimes they have to get that rage and that anger out of them, and they take it out on a child. I once had a case, I'm going to say about 7 or 8 years ago, where the case actually developed in such a way that it went from child abuse, child protective services getting involved, into a court case, because the adult had come back and sued the parent for corporal punishment being experienced every single day. And there was evidence. It was a very, very sad case. Shay Wallace says, mine was livid more often than not. Yeah, you're basically saying what I just said. She used to burst into my room at 4 a.m. almost every other day before she went to work, just to rage at me and wake me up. It scared me badly. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I think that, to be fair, I think I should put out here, and I think we all could say that parents get angry, right? Parents are good parents, are individuals who are trying to raise and guide and help us develop. And so sometimes their anger is the result of just being tired, right? And that's okay to a certain extent. But when it surpasses that, that's where the issue is, right, guys? Raymond Vincent Garcia Jr., hello and welcome. Glad to see you back on tonight's live chat. Love Laugh Live Maggie says, sometimes these parents tend to blame shift and play victim. Absolutely. You're the problem. You're the reason why dad left. You're the reason why I can't keep a job. The list goes on. As a therapist, let me tell you, who treats a lot of kids and a lot of adolescents, it is really hard for me to sit and hear some of the things that kids tell me, because sometimes I've developed over time into a more mature therapist, but I used to, and sometimes I think I still do, I sit there and I feel my own anger rising as I hear kids say things like, my dad quote unquote whooped me last night because I didn't eat my dinner. Or my mom told me that she never wanted to have me. The only reason she kept me was because my grandma didn't like abortion. Those kind of things or similar things, just I can feel my anger rise in therapy. I'm sure you guys can imagine, but it's just horrific, right? Robert Pukey Ray says, I've seen a very neglectful mom, and she's totally a covert, in my opinion. The envy who gets attention is an unspoken rule. Yeah, let me piggyback off that and just say that research does suggest that disturbed parents can also be parents who are jealous of their children. I meant to say that earlier, and I'm sorry, guys. I will post my video in the description box for you after this goes off, which focuses on jealous parents. I have 2 videos on that, so I'll post it in the description box. You're probably wondering if I see jealous parents in my practice. Absolutely. And sometimes the parent doesn't even know they're jealous until I point it out. Imagine Peace says, my stepfather had a very physically and emotionally abusive childhood. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes that adult grows up and abuses, right? And sometimes they don't. It just depends. That's really sweet of you to say. Thank you. The nurse who loved me 89 says it's really sweet that Miss Tamara remembers us. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think relationship is important, right? Even on YouTube. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at Fairy Girl's comment. Yeah. Fairy Girl says, it's hard to fit my folks in a specific box. Both were youngest of very sick psycho men. Ma has untreated hyperthyroidism. Yeah, which makes her really emotional, right? And probably traumatic brain injury from being thrown against a wall when she was a tot. Lord, that's a lot. Woo. Let me also piggyback off that, Fairy Girl, and just say that you may find that it is difficult for you to put your parents in a box. It's like, where do I place them? I don't know. There's many categories, right, that we can place them, but we just know that they are disturbed. you know? Okay, I'm looking for just a few more comments before we leave, guys, because I am so way over. Okay, I'm just looking. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anyone. Here's someone that I haven't seen. Maybe, okay, I'm going to put in here, and I will answer that question, Red Velvet. I'm going to come to you next. Llewellyn Weldon says, my mother groomed my sister to hate me. She acts like she is their sister. Oh, and they isolate me. I'm 67 and the triangulation doesn't stop. Yeah, absolutely. So my mother groomed my sisters to hate me. Well, yep, maybe so. Just based on what you're saying here, she acts like she is their sister. Yeah. Yeah, that's toxic triangulation. That's, sometimes parents who are disturbed and unstable, they don't know that they're triangulating, excuse me, and sometimes they do. It just depends on what you're dealing with. Red Velvet asks me a personal question that I'm very comfortable answering, and I'm going to say no, I don't have children, and here's why. I decided to put all of my energy for this point in time in my life into my profession to help others. And to make a sacrifice, right? Because if I have children of my own, I don't know if I'd be able to do these kind of things, right? Because my time, I would want to put that all into my children. So there you have it. There's my reason for not having kids for right now. You never know. It may happen one day. And then you guys will be the first to see it. Elizabeth Pepper says, I confronted my mom and her reply was, you were a good con artist when you were a child. I have CPTSD and borderline personality disorder traits, but I wouldn't blame my child for harm I caused. Yeah, absolutely. You only blame your kids for harm that you caused when you're unstable yourself, right? In some fashion. Before we sign off, guys, let me read this one. I'll read 2 or 3 more comments and then we will go. I will sign off. I don't want to hold you guys all weekend, all Friday night. But Sunkissed Dark and Dainty 01 says, my egg donor, oh man, my egg donor rubbed my hand after I got up the nerve to tell her I cringe whenever she touches me. She rarely touched me prior to that. She was a covert narcissist. I have gone no contact nearly 7 years. Wow. And I'm sorry about that. Instead of calling her your mom, she's your egg donor. Ooh, that's a interesting thing to say. That says a lot. Shay Wallace says, Tamara, I'm not trying to be cheeky, but my mom was very ragey. But a pothead. Yeah. I thought weed is meant to relax people. Not always. Not always. There's a lot of controversy around marijuana, and a lot of people fail to realize that no matter what, it's still a drug. It's like Prozac. Okay, it may make you feel less depressed, but it's still a drug. Lexapro. It may make you feel less anxious, but it's still a drug, right? And even though you may feel good, there may come a point in time where your brain chemistry changes and it makes you angry. Or there may come a point in time where you try that medication and it's not a good dose for you. And so that's the same with marijuana. I almost feel like most people, including some of the teenagers that I have in therapy, they talk about marijuana like, hey, let's use it all day, every day because it's legalized in some areas. Okay, but Prozac is legalized, but that doesn't mean we should take it all day, every day, right? So doesn't shock me, Shay. Raymond Vincent Garcia Jr. says, can borderline symptoms mix with complex PTSD symptoms? Yes, they can. And a lot of time they overlap. Fear of abandonment is an overlap between the two. Irritability and rage, overlap between the two. Dysphoria and depression, overlap between the two. And poor self-image and self-esteem, overlap between the two as well. Like we could go on and on and on. Okay. I see so many good comments. Okay. Let's pause here, guys. I want to read all of these because they're so good. YouTube will make the live chat box available to all of you to be able to go back through and see and read after this live chat. So tomorrow, within 12 hours. I hate that they do it. I don't know why I hate it. But it will be available to all of you. Thank you so much for being with me in this live chat tonight. I hope it was helpful. I hope you have a good rest of the weekend. I may come back tomorrow with another important topic, so just stay tuned for that, guys. Let me know if you want me to talk about complex PTSD. I did just do a video on that, and I can post that in the description box. But if you like, we can talk about complex PTSD and jealous parents. I do have that one on standby for you guys, so let me know if you want me to talk about that tomorrow. All right, guys, I'll see you soon. Have a good night.